When my son turned 35, I thought I knew him. I truly believed that somewhere beneath his long silences and occasional forgetfulness on Mother's Day, there was still love. But when he discovered I had inherited $15 million, his wife looked me dead in the eye and said, "She doesn't deserve that kind of money. It should belong to us." They didn't ask. They demanded. Said they were entitled to it. Said they'd earned it more than I had. After everything I'd given, everything I'd quietly lost for their comfort, something inside me broke. And what followed made them wish they'd never opened their mouths. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're joining me from. I want to see just how far this story travels. It was snowing the day they arrived. Big, soft flakes floating down like confetti, coating my porch swing, settling on the railing. I remember how quiet it was, like the world had taken a breath and decided to hold it just for me. I had a roast in the oven. Honey-glazed ham, my mother's recipe. The kind that caramelized along the edges and filled the whole house with the scent of cloves and brown sugar. Sweet potatoes were cooling on the stovetop. I'd mashed them with a touch of cinnamon, the way Daniel liked when he was little. The table was already set. My best linens, the ones with the embroidered edges. Crystal glasses I only brought out for Christmas. The candles flickered in their holders, casting long shadows across the silverware. I even folded the napkins like swans. Silly, maybe, but I wanted things to feel special. I wanted the house to feel full again. Daniel walked in first, carrying Emma on his hip. She was 4 now, all curls and questions. Ashley followed, perfectly put together in a cream sweater that made her look like she'd stepped out of a catalog. She kissed my cheek, air-light, then looked around as if assessing whether everything met her standards. "It smells nostalgic," she said. I couldn't tell if that was a compliment. We sat down to eat around 5. Emma insisted on saying grace. I watched her tiny hands clasped in Daniel's, and something in me softened. Maybe things were better than I thought. Maybe I'd just been too alone, too long, letting shadows fill in for facts. Conversation was light at first. Daniel asked about the neighbors. Ashley made polite noises about the drive-in. I poured the wine. We passed the ham, the potatoes, the green beans sautéed with almonds. The clinking of silverware and the hum of soft jazz from the record player made the kitchen feel almost warm again. Then it happened. Daniel stood to gather plates. Always helpful, always quiet. He reached across the buffet, and his elbow knocked the corner of my briefcase. It had been sitting there since morning. I'd meant to put it away. The leather case hit the floor with a dull thud, popping open as it landed. Papers spilled like leaves. Legal forms, bank letters, one manila envelope marked estate resolution. I bent down, heart thudding. My hands fumbled. Ashley was already leaning over the table, her fork abandoned on the china. Daniel crouched beside me, sifting through the pages, eyes scanning too fast. "Mom," he said, voice tight. "Is this real?" I didn't answer. I just gathered the papers into a pile, trying to slide them back into the briefcase, but my fingers weren't working right. They felt stiff. Ashley reached across the table, her eyes narrowing as she read the bold numbers at the top of the page. 15 million, she said softly, like it was a prayer. Then louder, almost laughing. "From your brother's estate?" I swallowed hard. "Yes. Harold passed 3 months ago. It only just cleared probate." Daniel sank back into his chair like his legs had given out. He looked pale, almost sick. Ashley's smile froze. Then sharpened. We didn't know he had that kind of money, she said. He built a software company, I replied, folding the papers carefully. Sold it before the cancer spread. Never married. No kids. I was all he had. The room went quiet. Only the ticking of the clock in the hallway filled the space. Ashley reached for her wineglass but didn't drink. Her eyes never left the documents now tucked tightly under my arm. 15 million, she repeated. Then she smiled. Ashley always smiled when she wanted something. It was the same smile she wore when she asked for help with their down payment. When she hinted about private school for Emma. When she talked about her dream kitchen. But this time, it didn't reach her eyes. I looked at my son, my only child. I'd held his hand when he took his first steps. Stayed up through high school fevers. Co-signed loans when he couldn't keep a job. And now he was looking at me like I was a winning lottery ticket. Mom, Daniel said, choosing his words with care, that's a lot of money. Ashley nodded, her voice syrupy. It's more than anyone your age needs, really. But it could change so much for the kids. For us. College, a better house, security. I said nothing. The tree lights blinked behind her. Green, red, green, red. The roast on my plate had gone cold. I haven't decided what to do with it, I said at last. Ashley reached for her fork again, tapping it lightly against her plate. She smiled wider, her teeth sharp in the candlelight. Ashley cackled sweetly, but her eyes were cold as a freezer door cracked open. The papers were back in the briefcase. I'd tucked them in, fastened the latch, and slid the case beneath my chair. But the air in the room had shifted. The warmth from the oven, the comfort of the candlelight, the scent of clove and cinnamon, it all felt thinner now. Like something invisible had opened the window and let the cold in. Daniel reached for the gravy boat, but his hand trembled slightly. He poured too much, watched it pool around the green beans without taking a bite. Ashley sipped her wine, crossed her legs, then uncrossed them. She was smiling again. That smile that never quite touched her eyes. She looked at me like someone politely tolerating a waitress who had taken too long to refill her glass. I reached for my napkin, smoothed it over my lap. My fingers still remembered folding them into swans that morning. I used to do that for Daniel's birthday when he was little. Back when he liked small things. Quiet gestures. Thoughtful corners of love. I think, he said slowly, finally looking up at me, we should talk about the money. My stomach clenched. It's not about the amount, Mom, he added quickly, as if that softened anything. It's just, 15 million is a lot. Ashley jumped in, her voice sweet but firm. It's not that we're ungrateful. Not at all. But this is life-changing money. For all of us. I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to. Daniel pushed his plate back slightly, leaned on his elbows. I noticed his shirt had a faint wrinkle near the collar, like he'd rushed to get dressed. He'd always been a little careless with his appearance unless Ashley reminded him. You've always lived modestly, he said. And that's fine. But this kind of money, it shouldn't just sit in a bank. Ashley placed her hand on his forearm, nodded along like a politician being interviewed. We're not talking about taking it all, she said. We just think it would be wise, fair, for some of it to help the family. Emma and Owen's college funds. A better school district. Maybe pay off the mortgage. She gestured vaguely to the mantel, where framed photos of the kids smiled back at us. I'd dusted them that morning. The glass still sparkled. I haven't made any decisions yet, I said quietly. Daniel sighed. We're not trying to pressure you, he said, but of course they were. It's just, you're getting older. There it was. Ashley jumped in like a swimmer who saw a crack in the ice. Exactly. You're still independent, obviously. But how much do you really need at this stage in your life? A simpler place, maybe. A little traveling, sure. But this money could give our family a future. I looked at her. Really looked. She was younger than me by more than 2 decades. Her makeup flawless. Her nails done in a soft mauve that matched her sweater. Her earrings glinted in the candlelight like tiny hooks. And she was talking about my life as if it were already finished. I'm not dead, I said softly. She blinked, taken aback. Daniel sat straighter. No one's saying that, he said. We're just trying to be realistic. About what? I asked. How long I have left. They both shifted. The silence stretched. Ashley finally broke it. We love you, she said. But this is about doing the responsible thing. Money like that should be moving. Working. Helping people. Helping people. I had helped. For years. Tuition. Down payments. Groceries during unemployment. Weekends babysitting while they went on little getaways. Birthday parties I funded without ever being asked. Ashley's kitchen renovation that somehow just needed a little boost. But they weren't talking about help. Not anymore. This wasn't a request. This was expectation dressed up as logic. Daniel stood, walked over to the kitchen window. He looked out at the snow falling on the backyard. I followed his gaze. The old birdhouse he built in middle school still hung from the maple tree. Crooked now. Faded from years of weather. He used to be so proud of it. 15 million, he said again, softly. It's not just money, Mom. It's opportunity. I stayed seated, napkin still in my lap. What about what I want? I asked. My voice didn't rise, but it cut through the room like a dropped glass. They were both quiet. Ashley looked down at her plate. Her roast was untouched. Daniel turned back toward me, his expression blank in that way men wear when they don't know whether to apologize or double down. I just think, he said, you've already had your time. That's when I stopped hearing them as my family. Their voices blurred into the clink of cutlery, the tick of the hallway clock, the low hum of the refrigerator. All familiar sounds. But suddenly foreign. I looked at the candle burning between us. The flame danced in the draft coming from the window near the sink. Its light flickered across Ashley's face. She smiled again. She always smiled when she thought she was winning. I sat there, surrounded by food I'd cooked, photos I'd framed, gifts I'd given, love I'd poured for decades. And I realized something cold and clear. I was sitting at my own dining table, in my own home, on Christmas night. And I felt like the guest no one had invited. I sat there, in the middle of my family dinner, and I felt like a stranger. Like someone had pulled the chair out from under me without making a sound. I sat there, in the middle of my family dinner, and I felt like I didn't belong. I sat there, and I realized something I never thought I'd have to ask. Was I still their mother, or just the wallet they hadn't emptied yet? I sat there, in the middle of the family party, feeling like an outcast. The house settled the way old houses do when winter wraps around their bones. The furnace kicked on every 20 minutes with a low groan. Pipes rattled faintly behind the walls. The wind hissed through the gaps in the window panes, but none of it could drown out the sound of my thoughts. I couldn't sleep. It was nearly midnight, and I was still wide awake, lying stiff beneath the quilt I'd stitched the summer Margaret was dying. My eyes followed the slow-moving shadows on the ceiling as headlights from passing cars bled through the curtains. The air was dry, tinged with the scent of roasted cloves still clinging to the walls. Dinner had ended hours ago, but my chest still felt tight, like I'd swallowed something sharp. They were staying the night. Of course they were. I'd made up the guest bed earlier that week with fresh sheets and the heavy down comforter Daniel used to call the Cloud. I thought it would be comforting. Now I wanted to rip it off the mattress and throw it in the trash. Above me, the floorboards creaked. One footstep, then another. Slow. Pacing. I told myself it was nothing. Just someone getting a glass of water. Just Ashley checking on the baby monitor. But then the murmurs started. Faint at first. I couldn't make out the words. But the tone, that hushed urgency, I knew it too well. I'd heard it in hospital waiting rooms, in late-night calls between siblings deciding how to split a parent's estate before the parent had even passed. I sat up, pressing the pillow behind my back. The glow from my bedside clock read 12:41. I closed my eyes and listened. She doesn't deserve that kind of money, Ashley said. Her voice, muffled by the ceiling, still managed to drip with clarity. Daniel didn't respond right away. The silence was heavier than any reply. She's lived her life, Ashley continued. She worked a desk job. She lived in this tiny house. Nothing extraordinary. Just, plain. Now suddenly she's sitting on 15 million like some silent millionaire. For what? My heart beat louder than the wind outside. She gave up a lot for you, Daniel said, but there was no conviction in his voice. Only weariness. Ashley scoffed. And we haven't, she shot back. We've been scraping by while she holds on to money she'll never use. And let's be honest, Daniel. She's not getting any younger. That's when the pacing stopped. Then, more quietly. I've been thinking, she said. If she refuses to be reasonable, we might have to consider legal options. My breath caught. Daniel mumbled something I couldn't make out. Ashley kept going. We can get a professional evaluation. Maybe even talk to a lawyer. If we frame it the right way, confusion, erratic decisions, hoarding behavior, it wouldn't be hard to raise concerns about her mental state. I pressed my palm against my chest. I could feel my heartbeat slamming against my ribs. She's been alone a long time, Daniel. You know how that affects people. Depression, maybe. Cognitive decline. Look how she reacted tonight. Cold. Guarded. She barely touched her food. I thought about the slice of ham I'd pushed around my plate. How my fork had trembled when I saw Ashley's face change. How far are you willing to take this? Daniel asked. That pause again. Far enough to protect what should be ours, she said. My throat tightened. I couldn't move. Couldn't blink. They were talking about me like I wasn't downstairs. Like I wasn't alive. She'd never survive a court battle, Ashley said. It'd break her spirit. She'll cave before it gets that far. She's not going to just give it to us, Daniel replied. She might, Ashley whispered. If we push the right buttons. Guilt. Family legacy. Emma's future. We start small. Make her feel like she's selfish for holding on to it. Then we escalate. The heat in my face was replaced by a wave of cold that spread from my neck to my toes. Not from the temperature. From the clarity. From the way she laid it out so calmly. Like planning a grocery list. I pulled the quilt tighter around me, but I couldn't stop the shaking. My hands, my legs, even my jaw. I don't know, Daniel murmured. She's my mom. Ashley didn't reply immediately. Then, with quiet venom. She's a liability. The words landed with a finality that stole the air from my lungs. I had spent the last 3 decades being their safety net. Their babysitter. Their emergency fund. Their excuse for not growing up. And now I was a liability. I lowered myself back onto the pillow. My bones felt older than they had an hour ago. My heart, heavier. Above me, the voices grew quieter. The bed creaked once. Then nothing. But the silence didn't soothe me. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the water stain in the far corner. I'd meant to repaint it last fall. But Daniel said not to bother. The roof's holding, Mom. Don't waste your money. I'd listened. I always did. Now I couldn't stop hearing Ashley's voice. She's a liability. And Daniel. My son. He didn't disagree. He didn't say a word. He let it hang in the air, unchallenged. Accepted. My son calls me a burden. And he wasn't joking. The kitchen was still dark when I came down, barefoot and numb, the floor cold against my heels. Outside, the sky hadn't fully turned yet. That pale, watery blue of early winter light pressed against the windows, and the snow that had fallen overnight shimmered faintly, untouched. The silence was heavy. I didn't bother turning on the overhead light. Just the small lamp above the stove, casting a soft yellow glow across the counter. I filled the kettle, let the water heat. My hands moved out of habit. Reach for the mug. Scoop the coffee. Press the button. I'd done it every morning for years, but that day, it felt like I was watching someone else's body do it for me. Steam curled from the cup as I sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in my old shawl. The kind with tiny holes worn into the corners from years of washing. It still smelled faintly of lavender dryer sheets. I held the mug close, felt the warmth, but I couldn't taste the coffee. Not really. Their words were still echoing in my ears, louder than the furnace or the ticking clock above the fridge. She's a liability. She doesn't deserve that kind of money. She'll cave before it gets that far. I stared out the window. The backyard looked smaller somehow. The birdhouse Daniel built in 7th grade hung crookedly, its paint chipped. The garden was buried under snow, but I could still see the outline of the raised beds I'd tended every spring. I used to believe that love, like vegetables, needed constant care. Sunlight. Water. Patience. But some things rot anyway. My eyes burned. I blinked quickly, reached for a pen. There was a notepad beside the phone. The kind I used for grocery lists. Eggs. Milk. Butter. This time, I wrote something else. Things I've done for Daniel. I didn't intend to. My hand just moved. One line. Then another. Then a third. Paid for 4 years of college. Co-signed his first car loan. Covered rent after he lost that sales job. Helped with the down payment for the house. Watched the kids every weekend for 2 years. Cooked every Christmas meal since he moved out. I kept going. Groceries during Ashley's maternity leave. Medical bills when their insurance lapsed. Cash, gifts that were never repaid. Birthday checks. Bailout after their kitchen flooded and they didn't have enough savings. 3 pages later, I stopped. My handwriting had grown tighter. Angrier. I looked down at the list. It wasn't even everything. Just the things I could remember off the top of my head before the coffee had cooled. I set the pen down, leaned back in the chair. The furnace kicked on again, humming low, as if it was trying to comfort me. I thought about my mother. Margaret. She used to say that love without boundaries turns into sacrifice. And sacrifice, if you're not careful, becomes resentment in disguise. I never wanted to resent my son. I truly didn't. But what do you call it, when every act of love becomes ammunition used against you? I looked at the cabinets. The chipped white paint I'd been meaning to touch up. The Christmas cards still taped above the sink. None from Daniel this year. Only one from Ashley's sister, with a printed photo of the kids. Not even a note. Was this what family was now? Transactional. Strategic. Conditional. I used to believe that the more I gave, the more I'd be appreciated. That showing up, being dependable, offering help without strings, that was how love worked. I thought, foolishly, that my quiet sacrifices were being seen. But maybe they weren't. Maybe they were just expected. Entitlement looks an awful lot like gratitude when you're desperate to be loved. The clock ticked louder now. Or maybe the silence was thinner. I turned the notepad over. I didn't want to see the list anymore. Not yet. But I didn't tear it. I didn't throw it away. That list was no longer for Daniel. It was for me. A record. A reminder. Proof that I had done enough. I had done more than enough. And for the first time in a long time, I realized something. I didn't have to keep doing it. I didn't owe them anything more. Not my money. Not my peace. Not my silence. I stood, poured out the rest of the coffee. Watched the dark liquid swirl down the drain. Then I rinsed the cup, dried it carefully, and placed it back on the shelf. Upstairs, the floor creaked faintly. Someone stirring. I didn't freeze this time. Let them wake. Let them find the kitchen empty. Let them wonder where the soft, predictable woman had gone. Because she wasn't here anymore. She had poured her last cup of silence. She had folded her last napkin swan. I once lived for my child. But now, I live to protect myself. The next morning, I woke before the sun. There was no hesitation in my body, no lingering ache of doubt. Just a quiet readiness I hadn't felt in years. I made toast I didn't eat, boiled an egg I left untouched. The kettle hissed, but I let the water cool in the cup. My appetite was gone, replaced by something sharper. I had made my decision. Now it was time to act. By 8:30, I was at Thompson and Hill. The office smelled of polished wood and strong coffee. I sat in the waiting area with a folder clutched in my lap, its corners softened from years in my drawer. Inside were 35 years of proof. A mother's love, quantified in checks, wires, and credit card statements. The receptionist offered me water. I shook my head. Sarah Thompson called my name 15 minutes later. She was younger than me, with eyes like glass marbles, cool, focused, no nonsense. Her handshake was firm, respectful. I liked her immediately. We sat across from each other in her office, sunlight pouring through the wide window behind her. Dust floated lazily in the beam, but nothing about Sarah's presence was soft. What brings you in today, Mrs. Ellis? I opened the folder. My fingers didn't tremble. I think my son and daughter-in-law are planning to challenge my mental capacity, I said. Because I inherited money they believe they deserve. And I want to be ready. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't interrupt. These, I said, laying out the papers, are student loan documents I paid off for Daniel. This is a down payment for their first home. These, I tapped the column of numbers, are monthly transfers for 3 years. Rent, groceries, car repairs, you name it. Sarah leaned in, scanning the pages. She didn't smile. But her eyes lit up with the kind of interest I'd only ever seen in people counting money or planning a storm. And you kept all this? She asked. Every last one, I said. She looked up. Good. We spent the next hour going over my finances, my assets, my history with Daniel and Ashley. She took notes with the precision of someone slicing a diamond. When I mentioned overhearing their late-night plans, her lips thinned into a line. Here's what we'll do, she said. You'll go in for a cognitive evaluation. A thorough one. Full-spectrum testing. You pass with flying colors, and I suspect you will. We'll have medical evidence to counter anything they throw at you. Then we prepare a defensive file. If they move forward, we'll be ready. If they don't, well, they'll know they picked the wrong fight. Her confidence didn't soothe me. But it steadied me. By noon, I was sitting in the lobby of Dr. Alan Ford's clinic. Neutral colors. Classical music playing too softly to notice unless you focused. A plant in the corner with one leaf browning. I filled out intake forms while the receptionist smiled too much. An hour later, I sat across from a man in his early 60s, with kind eyes and a sweater vest. Dr. Ford spoke slowly, carefully, like someone who'd spent years calming frightened people. I'd like to run a full cognitive series, he said. It's routine. Memory, reasoning, attention span, problem solving. Nothing invasive. Just you and me and a few quiet hours. I nodded. The tests were strange. Match the shapes. Repeat these numbers backward. Solve the puzzle in under 3 minutes. Recite a short story after a distraction. I found myself enjoying it. Not because it was fun, but because it made my mind feel sharp again. Like tuning an old piano and finding the notes still hold. By the end of the session, he closed his notebook and smiled. Mrs. Ellis, he said, you're not just cognitively intact. You're outperforming most of my 40-year-old patients. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. Thank you, I said. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table again. The same table where I'd served ham and sweet potatoes 2 nights ago. The plates were long washed. The candles had burned down to stubs. The house was quiet again. I opened the folder and looked at the documents once more. The tuition payments. The loan records. The bank transfers. The babysitting notes. All signed, dated, logged with the care of someone who never wanted to be a burden. 35 years of receipts, and not one thank you I could recall. I wasn't angry. Not then. What I felt was something simpler. Colder. Clarity. I stacked the papers back into the folder, neatened the edges, and slid it into the drawer beneath the sink. Then I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the dark for a long moment, watching the snow gather beneath the porch light. They thought I was fragile. They thought I was slow, soft, easily led. They thought being quiet meant being weak. But they were wrong. I wasn't fragile. I wasn't lost. And I wasn't done. They thought I was weak. I just never fought back before. The notification came in at 6:17 a.m. I hadn't touched my phone yet, but the screen lit up on the counter as I poured hot water over my tea bag. The light flickered once. Then again. Then again. I ignored it. By the time I sat down at the kitchen table, the screen showed 17 missed alerts. My phone buzzed twice more before I finally picked it up. The first message was from Linda Fay, who lived 2 doors down and made it her job to know everyone's business. Morning, Clara. I just saw Ashley's post, hoping you're okay. Let me know if you want to talk. The second was from June, my old book club partner. I'm sure it's not true. But wow, she's stirred people up. I opened Facebook. I wish I hadn't. Ashley's post sat there at the top of my feed, pinned with a caption that made my stomach clench. Hardest post I've ever written. Please read and share. Underneath was a photo of Emma, her cheeks a little flushed, sitting at the kitchen table with a nearly empty bowl of cereal in front of her. The lighting was soft. Ashley had always known how to frame a photo. The caption read, "My children haven't seen a full meal in days. While their grandfather sits on millions, we're scraping by. We asked for help. We begged. But money matters more to some people than family. Pray for us." There were 3 crying emojis. I scrolled down. Over 100 comments. Strangers and friends alike jumping in with outrage, concern, sympathy. How can someone do this to their own grandkids? This is elder abuse in reverse. Disgusting. If I had that kind of money, I'd give everything to my family. They didn't tag me. They didn't have to. Ashley's followers knew exactly who she meant. All it took was one photo, one story told with just enough glittering half-truths, and the town had turned. By mid-morning, I couldn't walk past the window without someone on the sidewalk slowing down. I saw the curtains twitch across the street. The mail carrier, who usually greeted me by name, dropped my letters and left without a glance. But that wasn't the worst of it. That came 2 days later, in a beige envelope delivered by courier. It was thick, official, cold to the touch. My name typed neatly across the front. Clara J. Ellis. I opened it at the kitchen table, just like I had with every other piece of mail for the last 40 years. But this time, my hands trembled. At the top of the page, in bold black ink, were the words, "Petition for determination of incapacity." I read it once. Then again. Slower. Daniel and Ashley were petitioning the court to declare me mentally incompetent. They'd submitted statements. Claimed I was unable to manage my own finances. Claimed I was confused, forgetful, erratic. That I had shown signs of cognitive decline. That I'd refused reasonable requests for family support. There was even a paragraph accusing me of paranoia, isolation, and hoarding behavior. They included statements from neighbors I barely knew. One woman said I left my trash bins out for too long. Another said I once wore mismatched shoes to the grocery store. Both were lies. Attached to the petition was a doctor's letter from someone named Patricia Mendez. I'd never heard of her. She claimed I'd shown signs of memory loss during a consultation. Claimed I didn't know my address. That I couldn't recall basic financial details. I hadn't seen a Dr. Mendez in my life. But there it was. Her letter, her signature, her fabricated concern. The final pages were worse. Daniel and Ashley had already filed an emergency motion to freeze $500,000 of my assets. My checking account. My savings. One of my investment accounts. All locked down, pending court approval. I stared at the paper. My breathing shallow. My chest tight. For a moment, I felt exactly what they wanted me to feel. Helpless. Alone. Then something shifted. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was colder than that. More exact. I stood, walked to the sink, and ran cold water over my wrists. The chill steadied me. My heart slowed. My thoughts sharpened. They'd crossed a line. Not just of decency. Not just of love. They'd crossed into war. This wasn't about entitlement anymore. This was theft, dressed in family language. Betrayal, cloaked in legal language. They had forged papers. Falsified medical claims. Manipulated neighbors. And they thought I would break under it. I dried my hands on the dish towel, then walked to the hallway closet. Pulled down the black file box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were tax returns. Receipts. Signed promissory notes. Handwritten letters from Daniel thanking me for each loan. Proof. I carried it to the table. Opened it. Started sorting. An hour later, I dialed Sarah Thompson's office. Her assistant picked up, cheerful and clipped. "Tell her it's Clara Ellis," I said. "And tell her I'm ready." The assistant paused. "I'll get her immediately." That afternoon, I drove to the courthouse. I filed my own paperwork. Response to the petition. Declaration of mental competence. Request for immediate release of frozen assets. The clerk gave me a look when she read the documents. "Looks like someone made a very big mistake," she said. I didn't answer. Outside, the snow had started again. Light, swirling flakes against the windshield. I sat behind the wheel of my car for a moment before starting the engine. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't quiet anymore. They had chosen their weapon. Now it was my turn to redraw the rules. The folding chairs creaked beneath winter coats and crossed arms. I stood near the back of the community center, watching as neighbors trickled in, their boots squeaking across the salt-stained linoleum. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. The air smelled like instant coffee and old paper. The meeting was supposed to be about neighborhood safety updates. Ashley had requested time on the agenda to talk about something personal and urgent. She arrived 10 minutes early, clipboard in hand, her expression a perfect blend of grief and resolve. She wore a soft gray sweater and just enough makeup to look tired but dignified. A stack of large poster boards leaned against the wall beside her. People greeted her with murmurs and sympathetic smiles. I didn't move. When Margaret Patterson, the committee chair, stood to open the meeting, Ashley stepped forward with the practiced ease of someone used to being the center of attention. "I know this isn't our usual topic," she began, her voice trembling just enough to seem sincere, but I didn't know where else to turn. "This has been one of the most painful months of my life." She lifted the first poster board. A photo of Emma, looking small and solemn beside an open refrigerator. "The children haven't had a hot meal in days," she said. "We've struggled quietly for months while my father-in-law, Clara, sits on $15 million and refuses to help us. Not a cent for food. Not a penny for school. Nothing." Gasps rippled across the room. Someone whispered, "Unbelievable." I remained in the back, hands clasped. My palms were dry. Ashley flipped through more boards. Overdue bills. A blurry photo of Daniel's car with a flat tire. A close-up of Owen's shoes, one toe poking through the front. She has the means, Ashley continued. But she chooses not to share. We've begged. We've cried. But she's hardened. Cold. We're being punished, for what, I don't know. I saw heads nod. Eyes growing moist. Sympathy gathering like rain clouds. Ashley held up one final image. A screenshot of her Facebook post, now shared hundreds of times. She may be legally sound, but emotionally, morally, she's abandoned us. And I believe the community has a right to know when someone among us chooses money over family. She stepped back, voice quivering. Silence followed. Then a few hesitant claps. Margaret stood slowly. Clara, she said, turning to find me in the back. Would you like to respond? I nodded. All eyes turned as I made my way forward, folder in hand. I could hear the rustling of jackets, the shifting of legs. I felt their scrutiny like heat. At the front, Ashley stepped aside but didn't move far. Her eyes never left me. I set my folder on the table. Opened it. I don't have poster boards, I said. I brought paperwork. I held up the first page. This is a record of bank transfers made from my account to Daniel and Ashley over the last 3 years. $2,000, every month. That's $72,000. For groceries. Rent. Whatever they needed. I laid the page flat. Pulled out the next. This is a wire transfer receipt. $150,000. Down payment for their house. A few murmurs now. Some people leaning in. This is a promissory note Daniel signed when I paid off his student loans. $45,000. Interest-free. Never repaid. I pulled out a stack of printed Facebook posts. Screenshots. Timestamps. And these, I said, raising my voice slightly, are public photos Ashley posted in the past year. Here she is in Cabo, on vacation, the same week she claimed they couldn't afford food. I passed the image to Margaret. Here's a picture of her new handbag collection. Estimated value, over $2,000. Posted 1 week before they asked me for help with utility bills. Ashley stiffened. She's lying, she said, voice sharp. I ignored her. This is Michael's new motorcycle. Purchased during his so-called unemployment. And this is a screenshot of Ashley tagging her friends from a spa weekend 2 days after telling me she couldn't afford diapers. The room had gone still. The sympathy was melting, dripping away. She calls me heartless, I said. But I have been paying for their lives quietly, steadily, for 35 years. Because I believed in family. Because I wanted to help. I looked around the room. But family is not a license to lie. Ashley stepped forward. You're manipulating them, she said. You cherry-picked. These are out of context. Are they? I asked, holding up another printout. Because the timestamps matched the very dates of your pleas. The lies weren't subtle. Just sloppy. A few people exchanged glances. Margaret cleared her throat. Ashley, she said gently, you told me last week Clara never helped financially. You said she refused to contribute anything. Ashley looked stricken. Her eyes darted to Daniel, who was sitting in the second row, face pale. I meant recently, she stammered. But the room had shifted. People were no longer leaning toward her. They were leaning away. I'm not here to win a popularity contest, I said. I'm here because someone had to tell the truth. I packed my folder. Closed it. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of Ashley's reflection in the dark glass of the window behind the podium. Her smile was gone. Her posture, rigid. And her eyes were wide with something I hadn't seen before. Fear. They hadn't turned against her because I was more likable. They hadn't turned because I made them cry. They had turned because they saw it clearly now. They didn't turn on her because I was old. They turned on her because she lied like an amateur. Collapse doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives like frost on a window. Quiet. Gradual. Inevitable. It started with the job. Daniel called one afternoon, voice tight like a too small collar. Said the company had downsized. Said he was let go. Said it wasn't personal, just numbers. I listened. I didn't interrupt. Just watched the snow pile against the back porch steps while he talked. He didn't ask for help. Not yet. Ashley followed days later. Her voice was different, sharp at the edges, like a glass that's cracked but hasn't shattered. She mentioned unfair treatment at the PDA, how neighbors had started canceling playdates. One even uninvited her from a fundraiser brunch. They're acting like we're criminals, she said. I didn't respond. She paused, as if waiting for comfort. When none came, she hung up. The next time they reached out, it wasn't to chat. It was a short email from Daniel. Subject line, financial support request. Just 4 lines long. No greeting. They needed money to cover the mortgage. Their savings had run dry. Medical bills were mounting. Emma's therapy was no longer covered by insurance. Could I help, just for this month? I didn't answer right away. I sat with the email open on the screen, cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Then I opened the folder. The one I'd built in silence for weeks. I reviewed every receipt, every canceled check, every line in the spreadsheet I'd started keeping. The total stared back at me. Over $380,000. Not counting the dinners. Not counting the hours. Not counting the nights I lost sleep worrying about whether they were okay. They used to see it as kindness. Then they saw it as duty. Now, suddenly, it was hope. But I wasn't their hope anymore. I replied 2 days later. Brief. Clear. Professional. Daniel, I've reviewed your request. At this time, I'm unable to offer additional financial assistance. I wish you both the best in managing your expenses moving forward. Clara. He didn't write back. Not immediately. But a week later, a thick envelope arrived. Hand-delivered. Inside were crumpled receipts, notes in Ashley's handwriting, printouts of old messages where I'd said things like, "Of course I can help," or "whatever you need." And a letter. Not asking. Demanding. They were calling it repayment. Calling it overdue. As if my silence all these years had been a contract. As if motherhood had come with fine print. They wanted more. So I called my lawyer. I want to file, I said. All of it. Every cent, principal and interest. Sarah was quiet for a long second. Are you sure? I looked at the ledger in front of me. I've never been more sure. The papers went out 2 days later. A demand letter, formally requesting repayment of all documented loans within 90 days or legal action would follow. I didn't hear anything for a week. Then came the voicemail. Ashley. Breathless. Unhinged. How dare you? After everything? After all we've been through? You want to sue your own son? You think people will forgive that? She paused, her breath ragged. You're not a victim, Clara. You're just bitter. And alone. I didn't delete the message. I played it again that night. And then I made tea. The days that followed were oddly quiet. No calls. No emails. No cars pulling up in front of my house. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, like the pause before a storm. Until one afternoon, I saw them. From the front window, I watched as Daniel stepped out of their car. He moved slower than usual. Shoulders slumped. Ashley followed. She wasn't dressed for drama this time. No lipstick. No camera-ready expression. Just a stained sweatshirt and dark circles under her eyes. They didn't knock. They sat in the car for almost 10 minutes before driving away again. That was the first time I felt it. Pity. Not forgiveness. Not softness. Just the strange ache of watching someone realize the show was over. I knew that feeling. I'd lived that feeling for decades. But now, I was no longer part of the audience. I was holding the curtain. A week later, another letter arrived. This one from Daniel. Handwritten. The ink shaky. The sentences disjointed. He said he was sorry. That things had gotten twisted. That they were overwhelmed. That they never meant for it to go this far. But it wasn't an apology. Not really. It was a warning wrapped in sentiment. A prelude to negotiation. They still thought I could be bent. They still thought I would blink. But I wasn't blinking. I was calculating. I had every date. Every number. Every broken promise filed, stamped, and organized. They once saw me as a walking wallet. Now the wallet wanted every cent back. They once saw me as a walking wallet. Now the wallet was walking straight into court. It was a Tuesday. The kind of gray afternoon that presses low on your shoulders. I just folded the last of the laundry and set a lemon loaf to cool on the counter when I heard the knock. 3 soft raps. Hesitant. Too polite to be neighborly. I didn't rush. I wiped my hands on the dish towel, took one steady breath, and opened the door. Daniel stood there, shoulders stooped, hands stuffed in the pockets of his coat. Ashley beside him, lips pressed into a line too straight to be a smile. Her eyes darted past me into the house, as if already measuring what they thought they could still claim. Can we talk? Daniel asked. I stepped aside. They walked in without waiting for an answer, coats still zipped, like people ready to flee if things turned cold. The living room was warm, a soft citrus candle burning on the mantel. The fireplace on low. My old rocking chair creaked faintly as I sat down, placing a thin folder on the coffee table between us. No one spoke at first. Ashley shifted on the couch, hands clenched in her lap. Daniel avoided my eyes, staring at the lemon loaf in the kitchen as if it might save him. Finally, Ashley cleared her throat. We don't want this to go to court, she said. Her voice was thin but carefully controlled. It's not good for anyone. Especially the children. I said nothing. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. We know things got tense, he began. We've had time to think. We were emotional. It was never about taking advantage of you. We just wanted things to be fair. I reached for the folder. They watched me closely. I pulled out 2 crisp pages. Set them side by side on the table. The debt summary with itemized dates and amounts. Loan 1. Loan 2. Monthly transfers. Home payments. Education costs. Medical emergencies. Vacation advances. Grocery fills. Total, $412,000. Ashley leaned in. Then she saw the signature. Her own. Daniel's too. It was all there. Dated. Initialed. Legal. The silence was thick. The only sound was the faint ticking of the wall clock behind me. Ashley's face flushed. Her lips parted, then snapped shut. Her hand twitched like she was about to swipe the papers off the table. "You kept all of it," she finally whispered. "I did," I said. "Because love doesn't erase the need for memory." Daniel looked pale. I slid a third page across the table. A payment schedule. Neat columns. Monthly breakdown. Interest waived. Grace period offered. "You have two choices," I said calmly. "You can begin repayment under these terms. Or you can reject it and face the legal consequences. But this is your final option before I file the motion." Ashley stood up. "You're unbelievable," she hissed. "You're going to bleed your own family dry?" I didn't flinch. "You bled me for 30 years, I said. Quietly. Without receipts. This is me choosing to leave the wound." Daniel remained seated. His hands were shaking now. I could see the flicker in his jaw, the war between shame and habit. The way boys learn not to cry but never quite learn how to apologize. "She's serious," he murmured to Ashley. Ashley spun to face him. "We're not paying her. This is blackmail." "No," I said. "This is accounting." They didn't move. The fireplace clicked softly. The smell of lemon and sugar filled the room like memory. "You always said family mattered more than money," Ashley said bitterly. "And that's exactly why I stopped giving you both either," I replied. She stared at me. For a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not regret. Not guilt. Fear. Not of me. Of losing what she thought was guaranteed. Daniel finally spoke again. What if we can't do it right now?" I slid the payment plan toward him. "Then say that. And we'll begin there. But if you don't speak truth, don't expect me to answer with grace." He nodded slowly. Ashley didn't. But she sat down again. They stayed another 15 minutes. No shouting. No tears this time. Just questions. Hesitations. Muted calculations between glances. When they left, Daniel thanked me. Ashley didn't speak. But she didn't tear up the papers either. I closed the door behind them. Walked back to the kitchen. Cut a slice of lemon loaf for myself. It was still warm. I sat by the window with my plate. Outside, the sun had slipped lower behind the trees. Long shadows stretched across the snow. For the first time in months, I tasted what I'd baked. Sweet. Sharp. Real. They thought motherhood was an unlimited bank. They forgot banks come with limits. A mother's love is wide. But the account has a ceiling. I was in the garden when they came back. Late afternoon light was soft and golden, dappling through the maple trees. I was kneeling in a patch of soil, planting bulbs for spring, tiny white tips just beginning to peek. My hands were bare, the dirt caked under my nails. I could hear them before I saw them. Ashley's car doors slammed from the driveway like punctuation. The crunch of gravel underneath her steps sounded harsh against the quiet sunlit calm. I didn't look up right away. I finished pressing the bulb into the earth and stood slowly, brushing soil from my palms. They approached the porch, breaths uneven, tension knotting their shoulders. I didn't move from the flower beds. Michael spoke first. His voice was soft, urgent. "Mom, can we talk?" Ashley glared, ready to step forward, but Michael placed a hand on her arm. They stood behind me as though I was a judge they were pleading to. Her lips curled. "You chose me," she said, louder than necessary. "I thought you'd be an ally." This was her moment to shine. But instead something broke. He stepped forward. "I choose what's right," he said, his voice firmer than I'd heard in years. "That's always you." Ashley's face hardened. She glanced at him, but he didn't meet her eyes. I felt a shift in the air. Then I heard it, the tires spinning, rubber scraping as she backed the car out of the driveway, the sharp squeal telling the finality of her exit. We both watched until the car turned the corner. Sunlight fading into early dusk. Their silhouettes blurred. Michael remained still for a long moment. His eyes fixed on the road. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. The clarity in that voice could have shattered glass. I'd waited 30 years to hear it. It wasn't his apology that moved me, it was who he became in that moment. Not the boy who forgot Mother's Day or borrowed money he never repaid. Not the estranged son who stood silently at dinner tables. This new man, steady, honest, vulnerable. He knelt in the flower bed, beside me, breathing quietly. The bulb slipped from my hand. He placed his palm over mine. Earth touched earth. Skin touched skin. I didn't speak. I just listened to the sound of him breathing. The rustle of leaves above. The distant sound of a car door closing, then the final click of a locked key. He didn't pull away. Didn't say more. He let the silence say what words couldn't. After a long moment he asked, quietly, "Can I help?" I nodded. Took the trowel out of his hand. Guided his fingers to dig the next hole. Rather than plant alone, we planted together. The golden light softened. The bulbs settled into place. Soil covering bulbs like forgiveness covering wounds. He paused. Smeared dirt in the scars beneath his nails. Looked up at the sky, bright but fading. I said nothing. Neither did he. But something changed. I had lost the son I thought I had. But I'd found someone new. Someone worthy of second chances. Because the man who stood beside me didn't deserve my money. He deserved my forgiveness. I lost the son I knew. But maybe, this man is one worth forgiving. The ground was still cold, but soft enough to yield. We knelt side by side in the patch near the porch where I used to grow tulips before life distracted me. Before grief and habit made me forget that spring needs preparation. Michael wore old jeans and borrowed gloves. I didn't say much. Neither did he. Our words had been spent on harder days. What was left now were gestures. The bulbs were small, pale things. Some still with bits of papery skin clinging to them. They looked dead. You would never guess what they were meant to become. "I thought you hated tulips," he said once, quietly. I shook my head. I didn't hate them. I just forgot they needed me. We worked in rhythm. I dug the holes. He placed the bulbs gently, careful not to crush them. Then I covered them, patted the soil, and he watered behind me. A silent dance, choreographed by time and shame and the strange tenderness that follows breaking. The air was brisk. A low wind moved the bare branches overhead, their shadows sliding across the lawn like ghosts. After a while, I spoke. Not about him. Not about Ashley or the court letters or the years of silence. I talked about his grandfather. About the man who taught me to make pancakes without a recipe and how he used to sneak sugar cubes from the church coffee station when I wasn't looking. Michael smiled, just once. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I saw something in his posture that hadn't been there before. A stillness. Not defeat, not guilt. Acceptance. After we finished planting, I poured us both tea. We sat on the back steps, 2 chipped mugs between us. Steam curled into the gray sky. I handed him a plate with slices of buttered banana bread. He didn't say thank you, just ate. Slowly. Like he remembered something. Emma likes tulips, he said after a while. I know, I replied. She told me once. He looked down at his shoes. The dirt still fresh on the soles. I want to pay you back. All of it. I nodded. You will. But that's not the hardest part. He didn't ask what was. He already knew. Trust isn't a check you cash. It's something you earn by showing up on days without sun, when the ground is stubborn and your hands are sore and you plant anyway. There were no apologies that day. No declarations. Just the creak of the porch. The taste of warm bread. The knowledge that something was being buried, not to disappear, but to grow. That night, I sat by the window, watching the patch of earth we had tended. The wind had settled. The sky had gone dark. The bulbs were invisible beneath the soil, but I imagined them there, quiet, patient, beginning. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't shout its arrival. It seeps in slowly. Like water. Like light. I thought about all the versions of Michael I had loved. The baby who clutched my finger. The boy who scraped his knees and told half-truths. The teenager who pulled away too fast. The man who forgot how to say, thank you. And now this one. The man who knelt beside me in the dirt. The man who stayed. The bulbs won't bloom tomorrow. Maybe not next week. But the planting mattered. The return mattered. The kneeling. The listening. There are things that can only bloom after they've been broken. Some seeds only open once they've tasted rock bottom. It was early March when I first saw it. Just a hint of green, barely the size of my thumbnail, pushing through the soil beneath the kitchen window. I nearly missed it as I poured my morning coffee, distracted by the clink of the spoon in the cup and the distant hum of water running outside. But there it was. One small tulip sprout, curved and trembling but stubborn. Alive. I stood by the sink longer than I meant to, watching that single bud as if it might bloom right there under my breath. Out in the driveway, Michael was washing the car. It wasn't even warm enough for soap to lather properly, but he moved with quiet focus, sleeves rolled, bucket to his side. I could hear him humming something, low and off-key, a tune I almost recognized from the radio back in the 90s. It had been weeks since Ashley left. No slamming doors this time. No dramatic speeches. Just a suitcase, a silence, and a single email about forwarding her mail. The kind of ending that doesn't even echo. Since then, Michael had shown up every morning. Fixed the loose railing on the porch. Replaced the batteries in the smoke detector. Walked Emma to school when it wasn't his week. He didn't ask for praise. He didn't ask for anything at all. He just stayed. The house felt different now. Not noisier. Fuller. He started making breakfast on Sundays. Sometimes just scrambled eggs and toast. Once, French toast so sweet it nearly made my teeth ache. We ate in quiet, not because there was nothing to say, but because silence between people who understand each other feels safe. One morning I found the payment envelope on the kitchen table. Tucked inside was a modest check and a note scribbled in pencil. It didn't say much. Just, "Thank you for your patience. More coming soon." I didn't cash it right away. Not because I doubted him, but because I could see where it was coming from. He'd picked up weekend shifts at the hardware store. I knew the hours were long and the pay wasn't great. But I also knew this was his way of rebuilding. Not asking for shortcuts. Just showing up, every day, with his sleeves rolled and his jaw set. There was dignity in that. A kind I hadn't seen in him for years. And slowly, the house began to forgive him too. The creak in the hallway floor didn't sound so sharp. The guest room no longer felt like a tomb. Even the walls, once quiet and cold, began to hold warmth again. Emma came over one Friday. She helped me bake banana muffins. Her laughter filled the kitchen like sunlight through old curtains. She asked if the flowers would be ready by Easter. "I think they might," I said. And I believed it. That evening, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my legs and a cup of peppermint tea. Michael joined me, carrying 2 mismatched mugs. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't need to. Instead, we spoke about little things. How the neighbor's cat kept getting into the garden. How the basement door creaked when it rained. How Emma wanted to learn to ride her bike without training wheels. These conversations, small and plain, felt more sacred than any apology. At night, when the house settled into stillness, I would walk to the window and check the flower bed. Not because I doubted the bulbs, but because I liked seeing proof that something hidden could grow. Sometimes the most powerful things are the ones that refuse to give up. And neither had we. Spring hadn't arrived on the calendar. But it had arrived here. In small gestures. In steady hands. In the way Michael now checked the locks before bed and left the porch light on for me. The tulips didn't bloom all at once. But that first one? It opened in silence. Petals soft and sure. I stood over it that morning with dirt under my nails and coffee warming my palms. Michael was in the driveway again. Still humming. Still trying. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a woman holding on to everything alone. I felt like someone being held in return. There were still bills in the drawer. Still a court date on the horizon. Still a lot of words we hadn't said. But none of that weighed the same anymore. Not when the man I once lost had come back, not to beg, not to take, but to begin. Some debts are paid in checks. Others are paid in presents. He had given me both. And as I stood there watching the light shift across the flower bed, I realized something simple and hard and true. The only thing worth forgiving is the one who chooses to repair. With their own hands.